So you walk into a room and it's imperfect. The floor is out of level, walls aren't square, windows aren't set at the right elevation, and finding ways to hide and disguise that so that it tricks the eye into thinking that everything's okay and everything's right. And it not only looks right, but when you walk into the space, it feels right. Hey, good morning, everyone. It is that time of the week again. It's Wednesday. Can you believe another week has gone by? They go fast. When I was in school, the weeks used to go so slowly. I can recall, even just think from the time you were in kindergarten, first grade, Tilly's in first grade, she's 6, until the time you were 18. That's only 12 years. And that 12 years from first grade to senior year of high school felt like an absolute eternity to me. All of the weeks went so slow. They dragged on forever. And nowadays, I blink and another week has gone by. It's crazy to think. And it's scary because the older I get, the busier things get, the older my kids get. It seems as if it's going faster and faster and not slowing down, which I guess is why people tell you to slow down, enjoy life, enjoy your time, don't work too much, spend time with your kids. And there's that old saying, like it goes fast. The days are long, but the years are short. And it's true. Another week, another 7 days, another 7 days of me not getting done what I wanted to get done. But that's all right. Made it through another week. It's Wednesday, so you're moving towards cresting over that hump day, heading towards the weekend. Hopefully, you guys have some good things planned for the weekend. I'm excited. Give me one sec here. Sorry, I'm excited for springtime. I used to, my favorite time of year used to be fall. My wife and I actually got married in fall because that was my favorite time of the year. I just like the weather, hoodie weather, and getting colder and darker, and the season is just crisp weather. Heading into the holidays and winter, and I still like fall, but I think that I may have switched to being more of a fan of spring as I get older. It's just the new beginnings, the revitalization of life. You can see all the plants coming back. You're working your way out of wintertime, especially with having kids. Now our kids spend a fair amount of time outside, but it gets warmer. They want to spend more time outside. You can open the windows up. Life gets back to normal. It stays lighter longer. So the older I get, the more I enjoy springtime. I'm looking forward to spring. Again, we spend a fair amount of time outside, but it just makes it a little bit easier eating outside, getting the yard up and going for the upcoming summer. Selby starts. She plays softball all winter long. Excuse me. But outdoor softball season will start. So that's always fun, getting to the games and to practice and seeing friends and watching them play. I've found a ton of joy in watching Selby perform as an athlete, and she's not an amazing athlete. I tell people a lot of times that she's an athlete for the social aspect of athletics. All her friends play, and she enjoys the camaraderie and rooting her team on. I try and work myself. I'm more of a detail-oriented person and specifics and learning and technique. She doesn't want to hear it from me, which maybe it's just I'm her dad, but it's fun. Softball season's fun. Tilly will probably play again this year. She played essentially T-ball last year. So I'm looking forward to spring. It was a pretty mild winter here in Jersey. We didn't have we had maybe 2 cold spells, and they were very short. One was a day or two, and the other was maybe 2-3 days. So we had a mild winter, but still, I'm looking forward to get rid of the grayness around here and get some sunshine, blue skies, green grass, and start the new season. I know that winter is the beginning of the year, but for me, springtime really feels like that's the new year where everything's blooming, coming back to life from being dormant all winter long. And sometimes I feel that way. Like I've been dormant all winter long and I'm ready to come out. And it takes me until springtime to get going. Maybe it's post taxes. Um, on the agenda today for me, pretty simple one, at least in my mind, being that I perform a lot of trades and for the past dozen or so years in business have self-performed many trades, a lot of which are for my own reasons. Some it just doesn't make sense schedule-wise, control reasons, wanting things done a certain way, not wanting to pull off a job and have other jobs going on. So I've self-performed a lot of trades. I've become proficient in self-performing a lot of trades. While I may not be the fastest out there, being that I don't do it on a daily basis, I do them well. I want to do them the best that I can do. I'm not flying by the seat of my pants, but I do a lot of trades. I'm looking to hand that off and manage some of those trades rather than keeping them in house. There's certain trades that I will not hand off, and there's certain trades that I would love to have handed off years ago that I just don't enjoy doing. But a question that I get a lot is, what is your favorite trade? I could tell you what's not my favorite trade. I could also tell you what is my favorite trade. My least favorite trade is probably tile work, and that's not a knock at people who do tile work. Um, I don't like it. It's slow moving for me. It's very dirty. I don't like the feeling of thin set on my hands. It dries my hands out. I absolutely hate grouting. Grouting for me, not enjoyable. Tile work stresses me out. I actually don't mind tile prep, dry pack, stuff like that. That's fun to me. You can get it very perfect. It's quick. It's not a ton of cleanup. I'm also not the one mixing and humping up 5 gallon buckets of sand and cement. So maybe I would dislike it more if I were. But the tile work, you have thin set that's setting up. You're worried about waterproofing, compromising that waterproofing, making a mistake. You're cutting on this loud, wet saw and then having to dry off the tile. Is the tile going to bond? Is it going to fail? Is your thin set skinning over? Are you moving too slow? Is there lippage? Can you make it better? It kind of stresses me out. It's slow moving and the cleanup, right? So I get done setting tile. I feel like I have to throw my clothes out and then I have to spend 2 hours cleaning up my work site, throwing away tile scraps, wiping my tile down, cleaning my tools, cleaning my thin set bucket. I don't enjoy it. Painting, I enjoy a lot more now than I have before. Finishing, I enjoy when it goes well. It doesn't go well as often as you think. Not that it catastrophically fails, but there are a lot of issues with site finishing and I mean even shop finishing where they're changing technology, changing resins and binders within the paint, and you just face these difficulties and challenges that you have to sort out on the fly. And with experience, it gets easier and you learn to panic less. But for example, I don't know how many times in my life I've just told my wife, one more coat and then I'm on my way home. And that last coat does not go well. And then I'm there until however long, because for the next day I intended on finish being dry and moving on to the next trade and cleaning up. So I don't like that aspect of it. I don't like demo. I don't really like drywall that much. Hardwood flooring, we did a fair amount of for a while. I'm not in love with. It's hard work. I have some decent subs who can do that. Insulation, terrible. I haven't done that in a while, but that was never fun. Framing, I don't mind. Light framing, I don't mind. Decks, stuff like that, I think is fun in short stints for me. I don't want to be doing them every single day. But for me, the most enjoyable, if I had to choose one trade to do on a daily basis and not mix it up, it would have to be carpentry. Finish carpentry. for a lot of different reasons, and my reasons have evolved over the years. If first it started out, it was low risk for me. When I started my business, I could walk into somebody's home, and I knew that it's an applied finish. There's nothing structural to it. It can't leak. You don't need permits to install it. Um, it's relatively clean. You're dealing with sawdust and some adhesive and glue, but you're not having to wash tools at the end of the day. Cleanup is a vacuum or a sweep in a vacuum. It's pretty easy. It's not, you don't have to wear a mask like you do with painting. But for me, it was low risk. I knew that if like the worst screw up could be if an errant nail or trim screw went into a pipe or an electrical line. That realistically, if that happened, it would be my fault, but there probably should have been a nailer plate in those locations. So I would be okay with that and figuring out how to fix that. But I just knew for me, it was always low risk, and it stressed me out the least when I was first starting out. Worrying about a shower pan that you were dry packing and waterproof leaking was way more stressful, and I lost more sleep at night than if I had a piece of trim fail. What's going to happen? I could fix that relatively easily. Um, so I always enjoyed, excuse me, I'm having trouble breathing today, which is most days. But maybe I should wear a mask when I'm doing carpentry because I obviously can never breathe. um, but I always enjoyed it, and it was low stakes for me. Um, I enjoy the tools. I love my miter saw. I love my hand planes, my coping tools. I enjoy hanging doors, routers, planers, all my dust extractors, the joinery, the domino or biscuit joiner, the Lameo that I have now. They're all fun tools to use, and the nail guns, compressor. I just I can remember being younger and thumbing through magazines and books that I had, learning how to do built-ins or trim a door or do certain carpentry related tasks. And I would buy the books on whatever task I had to perform, and I'd read it and study it. And there's the guys, Gary Katz and a bunch of them. I guess his website's still up, but he had out DVDs. This is carpentry. Gary Striegler, exterior stuff, Mike Girton, Norm Abram, obviously, with This Old House, Fine Home Building. Taunton put out a bunch of books and magazines. There were the forums, but early on, those books were critical to my progression as a trim carpenter, any sort of carpentry, from handrails to decks, framing, light framing, doors, built-ins. I would just buy whatever books I could get my hands on and then read them and digest them and absorb that. So I remember being younger and reading through these magazines and seeing how a carpenter or one of these carpenters was executing a built-up crown and what their blocking looked like, and realizing that it was all approachable and it all was just one step at a time. You had to you had to peel back these assemblies and peel back this trim to framing or to blocking or to the jams, the framework, whatever was there, and then build it back up build it back up from there. So essentially you're figuring out your final detail and then just peeling it back and making sure that you hit your exposures and your elevations and where you want critical details to be. And I enjoy that part of it, the planning and everything that goes into the execution of it. I'm very detail oriented. I like control of things, type A personality. Trim works great for that. I'm getting paid for being fussy. I'm getting paid for taking my time and nailing critical details or walking through, creating mock-ups, getting approvals from customers, really digging into the details of why something looks or feels good, why it's designed to a certain size, what sizes work with other sizes, what profiles work together. There's a long history of that and tradition with that in a lot of the older homes that I work. So I really have enjoyed that. Early on in my career, I worked a lot with, I still do, I use their products all the time, but before I really had gained much knowledge with proper trim type and sizing and scale, I worked a lot with them, and Brent Hull had worked with Ryan over at Kukin Brothers developing their traditional trim catalog, and I've really enjoyed learning all of that, and I still do, and I still love seeing all of those designs come together or getting an opportunity to recreate them in my own spaces. So trim carpentry has always been so much fun for me. On a small job, on a big job, I just love getting done trimming something out that was very imperfect, that was handed over to you, or turned over by yourself, that you had um, a limited amount of opportunity to correct existing conditions with framing or layout, and then determining and figuring a trim solution to make that all disappear. So you walk into a room and it's imperfect, the floor is out of level, walls aren't square, windows aren't set at the right elevation, and finding ways to hide and disguise that so that it tricks the eye into thinking that everything's okay and everything's right. And it not only looks right, but when you walk into the space, it feels right. I've really loved that. That's always been very gratifying to me. Um, and I love the challenge of that. So for me, and this has kind of been the case with a lot of trade work, that I don't find the actual technical side of the trades to be that difficult, meaning the execution, the hands on your tools, the daily tasks. I find that they're all pretty manageable to understand and become proficient at. And again, that doesn't mean that I'm the best or the fastest at them, but I've never truly struggled when I put my mind to learning something. I can generally, my mind works in a way that I can break them down and problem solve and get to the end desired goal that I want relatively quickly. What I've always found to be the most gratifying and the most challenging is not necessarily these tasks, but how to do it right in from a design sense, um, or from a traditional architectural sense, and planning in advance so that all of these techniques come together to just look and feel right. So because you have the ability to create a tight miter or execute a very sound and clean scribe does not mean that you can install a kitchen in an old home very well, because you may not account for every single constraint or deficiency within that space. You have to be able to step back and really gauge and inventory that space and plan for all of these key details, your stool heights, window heights, crown molding exposure, if the ceiling's flat, how you're going to hide the crown, where the low spots in the floor are, where the high spots in the floor are, being centered in certain areas, making sure that transitions are the way that they need to be, that doors aren't going to interfere with each other. There's so many little things that come into place that just being a good carpenter isn't enough. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of trim carpentry where sure, you can pre-assemble a window casing and everything's tight and it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to break apart. But do you know how to properly design that window casing and stool and exposures to work with the heights of the room? If one window's off next to the other, how are you going to cheat your either jam extensions or trim type to make that appear as if everything's on the same plane or the same elevation? And that for me is what's fun, because again, anyone can go into a room that's perfectly square, perfectly level, and trim it out and it's going to look good. But going into these old homes and integrating the new with the old and making them appear as if they were done at the same time, and that they're not super wonky or sometimes matching wonky details, right? If a floor is way out of level and the budget or design does not dictate flattening or leveling the floor, and I go and put something in that's perfectly level, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. So you actually want to figure out, hey, do I want to make this parallel? Do I want everything to be parallel with the floor and the ceiling? Do I want to split the difference between parallel and level? Are there windows that are level while the floor is out of level because the windows were set and framed in at a later date on a remodel? So there's all these things to consider and decisions to be made with yourself, a homeowner, a designer, architect, whoever's involved. And it's not necessarily a right or wrong, but I enjoy that aspect of it. Sometimes you make the wrong decision. Sometimes it's tolerable. Sometimes you make the wrong decision and it just doesn't work and you got to rip it out and redo it. And that's a learning experience and you can take that with you. So for me, that's something that I find great gratification in, and I really enjoy the challenge of that. But I truly just also enjoy trim work. It's very soothing for me. Again, it doesn't induce a ton of stress in my life. So for me, the perfect day is to walk into a job, have a cup of coffee, my headphones, either listening to a podcast and some music and a big stack of lumber and all my tools set up just by myself. And I don't have to think about anything else, just going through my trim process. And this isn't to say that I have what it takes to be a production trim carpenter like Spencer Lewis. I wouldn't survive a week. I would get fired. I'm too slow, probably too meticulous for what needs to be done. But for my customers and what they want, I am afforded the luxury of being able to take the time that I do, and I would not survive in the pace and the environment that he works. So I'm not saying that that's what I want to do, because that's not what I want to do either. But if I could go around and install the trim work and the details that we do on these smaller projects on a daily basis, that would be ideal for me. Saying that, I also get bored fairly quickly, and I'm not sure, I might hate trim carpentry after doing it for 6 months or a year with nothing else to fill in. But right now, people ask me, what's your favorite trade? What would you want to do if you can only do one? And it would have to be trim carpentry. Again, I remember starting my business, and there's certain tools that you buy that you're so excited to buy, and you research and you look them up, and then you take care of them and clean them. Life gets busier, business gets crazier, you make more money, the investment is not as doesn't weigh as heavily on you as it did when you were 19, 20 years old. So I think that things change a little bit. But I can recall looking up and buying my first miter saw on my own, and my second miter saw, and then table saw, and then stand for my table saw, and just how I would bring it inside. My wife, I guess I was 23 when I started my business, so we were probably engaged for a lot of this, married probably for a lot, but getting a new tool and bringing it inside, and she's watching TV and I'm reading through the user's manual. And I always was just extra excited for the carpentry tools. um, I don't love spending money on tools that much anymore. I have a decent setup. Every now and then there's something I need to replace, and I get a little bit excited about it. But I like what I like, and I like what I've had for a long time. So if it were to break, I'd be bummed to probably replace it with what I have. But I mean, I have two low angle block planes. One stays in my belt all the time. One's a little bit bigger, that are by Lee Nielsen, that anytime I pulled, I was doing trim the other day. And I was running essentially what would be um, uh, like a plate molding on a wall up towards the top of it. And I cut the one miter in the corner. So it was a small profile, so I wasn't coping it. I cut the one miter a little long, and the corner dug into the drywall. So when I went to go fit the perpendicular piece to it, the fronts of the miters weren't matching up because I couldn't get the adjoining piece in further. So I just pulled out my block plane and shaved off the back of it. So instead of it protruding 3/4 of an inch out from the wall, it's now protruding 5/8 of an inch just on the first 6 inches. And then it can slide in and mate up with that inside corner the way that it needs to be. Excuse me. And there's just something so gratifying about pulling that little bronze hand plane out of my belt and hand planing that off. That's the stuff that I saw in these magazine and books when I was younger that just made me fall in love with carpentry. And I still love carpentry for that. I love the smell of sawdust cutting, when you cut through a knot and then you walk back into the room and you're like, that's burning poplar. Just all of those smells. I can recall being little and walking onto my dad's job sites and being in that post drywall stage where everything's primed and you just smell fresh cut sawdust and trim. And it's this visceral experience that you have that burns itself into your mind. And I know that my daughters will know that smell of my shop when they come in and the dust extractor's on, or I'm cutting or ripping something in that. That's something that later in life, assuming they're not um, involved with construction or carpentry, that they're going to walk into somewhere and they're going to say, oh my goodness, that smells like my dad's job sites or my dad's shop at home, or when I went onto the job and he would cut stuff. It's going to bring them back, and that's something that you never forget. Even the tool belt, I love my tool belt. I've tried so many different tool belts. I have a pre new Diamondback, so the older model, before they were kind of taken over and legitimized when they were still a really small operation before Connor bought it. So I have one of those original Diamondbacks and I still love it. I've tried so many other ones and I love how old it is. I love the character on it. I love the wood glue on it, all my spots for everything. And to me, that's a mark of who I am and what I do. And every time I put that belt on, I feel good. I can't work without it. But it's the same thing. My coping tools, saws, all my nice blades that I have. Um, I'm also a huge fan of the smell of wood glue. I don't know why. I just like it. So I don't mind having wood glue on my hands. I'm not running over to wash it off. It smells like carpentry to me. But it's also customers love that part of the job, right? Because it moves so fast from framing. Everything got closed up and you can see the space, but then the next step is trim or cabinetry, and that's when their space and all their investment really becomes concrete and evident and tangible for them, and they're so excited to see those trim details. So it's a really good part of the job, to show your customers and to showcase your skills and how clean you can be and how you can execute all of these details. And I do think that it's the badge of a good carpenter, how well you can execute these details. And that for me, I love it. I fell in love with carpentry early on in my career, and I never really pursued doing strictly carpentry. I don't necessarily want to pigeonhole myself, but I think that moving forward in my career, if I were to make a move, it would be more of a managerial position, but I would still like to do a fair amount of carpentry. Not necessarily massive packages, but cabinet sets, built-ins, things along those lines, because I do enjoy them and I do enjoy the challenges that they present and making things come together and really transforming a space. And those critical details for me make all the difference in the world. So if you guys and girls were wondering, if I had to pick one thing, it would certainly not be tile, and hats off to every tile guy out there. I have so much respect for what you do. I can't do it every day. It stresses me out. I just don't have what it takes. but I am in awe of the guys and girls who can on a daily basis. Um, Drywall work, same thing. I can do it for a day or two, and then my wrists are tired, my arms are tired, my neck and shoulders are tired from holding boards over my head and finishing over my head. Painting, I get pretty bored of pretty quickly, so a few days of painting, I'm good. Finishing stresses me out when it doesn't go well, and a lot of times it doesn't go well. Decks and stuff like that more framing, building related. I always say in theory that they're going to be amazing, and you get to work outside. And then honestly, the couple of decks I've done, one was when Rachel was ready to pop with Tilly, and it was over 100 degrees out for basically 2 weeks straight, and I was on a dark brown deck, sweating it out, trying to get this deck done before Rachel gave birth to Tilly. Another one, a cold front came through around Halloween, and I just froze my ass off the whole time. Another one, it ended up raining for a week and a half. So in theory, they sound amazing, but then I get outside and I'm fairly over it pretty quickly. One thing to be said for that, though, that I recall every time I do a deck is that when I get done work, I put my tools in a pile. They either go in my truck or I'll put them in a wheelbarrow and tuck them somewhere, cover them with the tarp, cover my saw with the tarp, and then I just blow off the deck. And I think to myself, this is so nice. I don't have to shake drop cloths. I'm going to pull up floor protection. I don't have to vacuum anything. So the nice thing about working outside and doing those type of projects is you get done work and you have 5 minutes until you can leave. I get done work now and I typically have half hour, 45 minutes of cleaning up before I can leave. So there's something to be said for that. But yeah, that's it. If I had to choose one thing, I'd be a carpenter. If I tell people what I do, it's generally either contractor or carpenter. And when I look back on all of this, and I think of what my kids are going to describe me as, it could potentially be contractor, builder, or carpenter. I'm fine with any of them. I think that there's a romanticism to the whole carpentry aspect of it and working with your hands and having hands that clearly display that you worked with them and you were a carpenter. So I'm cool with that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I had a couple of things that got me thinking about this and some people reaching out to me. And rather than try and explain to each and every person why and what was my least favorite and what is my favorite and what I like about it, I figured I'd hop on here and tell you this way. So hopefully it kept you busy for a few minutes. Again, another week has gone by. I got to get some more topics for you guys. I have a handful in my phone. I appreciate all you guys reaching out for suggestions or questions that you have specifically for me. Keep them coming. Email me them. It could be something very simple that I can dig into. If you just have a question about what I do, how I set it up, what tools I use, I can hop on here and record something so that it's not just beneficial to you. I can share that with everyone. If I'm going to take the time to do it for one person, I might as well share that with everyone. So if you have something that you want me to dig into, please email me. It's tyler@trghomeconcepts.com. Suggestions are more than welcome, being that I'm doing this once a week. I want to make sure that my content and what I'm producing and putting out there for you is relevant and also helpful to you guys and girls. So believe it or not, what you want and what you reach out to me and ask for and say is going to speak loudly to somebody else. You are not alone in this. You're not the only person who wants to raise their hand and ask that question. So definitely reach out to me. Shoot me an email. If I don't respond, I know somebody reached out to me via DM and said, "Did you get my email?" And sometimes I'll tell people that I didn't get their email when I did, but I swear I didn't get this email. And I had to have him resend it, and I don't know where it went or how I missed it. I'm not the most technologically savvy individual in the world. I'm just a carpenter, but reach out to me and shoot me an email and get me some suggestions. And again, I appreciate all the feedback, what you guys are doing. All the feedback has been super positive. Everyone's loving it. They're loving the Midweek podcast, the standard podcast, all the added content, and what the platform has been doing. So let me help you. Shoot me an email. Anything that you want to know, anything you want to dig into, personal life, business life. You have a question for me, you have an issue in your life that you want me to reach or tap into my network to try and solve for you, reach out, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. And if I don't hear from you this week, I better hear from you next week. If I haven't gotten anything recorded and you've emailed me or DM'd me, I do keep them in a notes folder on my phone, and I'm kind of picking them off as I go. So at some point I will get to them. I have a few things on my radar, and I do have some things that come up during the week that I just want to speak to, kind of change of pace, or switch directions, and then I'll tap back into what I was doing before. But again, reach out. Don't be shy. Any way I can help you. I appreciate all you guys do for us, and I want to give back as much as possible. So enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you guys Monday for the regular release of the Modern Craftsman podcast. Have a good one.